Hello, I'm Edward Peake, and I have been 3D printing for approximately a year and a half, maybe actually might be 2 years now that I think about it. And as my other channel I currently can't use because I flashed an airsoft gun for 2 seconds on a live stream, I'm now on this one. So I thought I'd answer some quick questions. These are just things that I get whilst I'm live streaming. These are the most common questions I get from people wanting to get into 3D printing, but they're not quite sure. And I've done it on some sticky notes. They were going very low tech with this one. I haven't even edited it, which I'm sure we'll come across. So, for starters, how hard is it to get into? And I'll be honest, it can be a little bit daunting because it isn't the simplest thing in the world to get used to. It depends on what you're doing. This, of course, I should have mentioned 3D resin printing. FDM printing is way easier, but 3D resin printing is a little bit more complicated, and you need a lot more things, and you need to know a lot more things to be able to use it properly. Once you get past that point of the confused, not getting anything to print properly stage, it's brilliant, but there will be an adjustment period. And generally speaking, I've done a whole video on this, but there is a lot of things that you need. You need a good space for it, and you need all the equipment for it, and you need to make sure that you don't have any sunlight hitting it. There's a lot of things that you could go into, but I've done a whole video on where to put a 3D printer, and that's not what this is. So how hard is it? I would say it's not the most welcoming hobby in the world, and a lot of people will disagree on how you're supposed to do everything, but generally speaking, if you ask online, there are plenty of online communities like my community which will help you. And if you come on any of my live streams, I will always tell you, to the best of my knowledge, how to get around a problem. For example, another one I've had, this is a side one, getting the supports off hot water makes it way easier. But yeah, to get into, how hard is it? Moderate. Not impossible, but you are going to have to put some effort in, and it is going to take some time. It's not a plug in and play. Unfortunately, it isn't that simple. And especially depending on the kind of printer you get, that is going to make a big difference. Which brings me on to my second point. What printer should you get? Now, this all depends on what you want to do and how big a thing you want to make. Generally speaking, the smaller end of the printers are still going to be able to make most big things anyway, because the bigger things, they're going to be split up. They're not going to be in one massive piece. I've got a ginormous thing downstairs, Bertha. I've called her. There's a whole video on that one. And that was printed in 5 different pieces on my GK2. And that is quite a big printer. Could you print it on a smaller one? Probably. It would just take you longer. That's the only difference. And generally speaking, if you're getting into 3D printing, think small and think cheap. Because when you make a mistake, there's going to be less resin to play with, and there's going to be less problems. And if you're only going to be printing things that are about miniature size and you're not really worried about batch printing loads of them, you just don't need a big printer. So I would say start small, start cheap. If you like it, go mad. But at the beginning, just get a cheap printer, or do what a member of my community does, Nard, and just find it on Facebook Marketplace or something. Personally, I probably wouldn't do that because I hate secondhand stuff, especially when it's like equipment, but cheap's fine. There's nothing wrong with small and cheap when you get going. And this now brings me on to the third thing I keep getting asked is it safe? And I will just quickly grab something to demonstrate my point. Yes, but also no. So 3D printing creates carcinogenic fumes. And some people do not take this very seriously. I always wear this, and I also wear these when I'm doing support. So if I get anything in my eyes, there isn't going to be any big problems. But it goes without saying, you have to wear a mask. I mean, it's not really worth the risk. It's still a pretty new technology, so there's not a load of information out there factually on what the long-term effects of 3D printing are. So I'm just assuming it's bad. So make sure you get yourself a decent mask. What is this? I think it's, trying to remember the technical specification. I can't, but it's got a carbon filter built in, and that's the thing that makes the difference. So spend a decent amount of money. I think this was about £30. Don't know what that is in dollars. 45? I don't know. Buy a decent mask. It's not worth the risk, is what I say. But is it safe? Not 100%. So what you're going to want to do is just make sure you keep your printers away from anything. And this goes for FDM and resin. They're both bad. In fact, you might argue that FDM is worse. So just make sure there is distance between your loved ones and your 3D printers, and that whenever you're around them, you're using these, and that the 3D printers are enclosed. So when you get into this hobby, are you taking a risk? Yes, to some extent. To some extent, you are taking a risk. But personally, for me, it's worth it. You have to think for yourself whether it is or not. Definitely do your own research. There might be some things that I haven't been aware of. If there's been any new articles, I don't believe there are, to say that there's anything that horrendous or that these masks won't protect you from. But generally speaking, yes, there will be some element of risk. Don't get lazy. Don't walk around it without your mask on, and you will be fine. And that is the 3 most popular things that I get asked on live stream. So I hope that was useful, and hopefully my strike gets removed from my channel. I say strike. I haven't been given a strike. Hopefully I'm allowed to live stream again, and I promise YouTube I will never use my airsoft guns or show them on stream again. But they were fake. They weren't real. Thank you.